Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, audible.
Okay. Sorry about that. And once again, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today for this exciting online awareness session on scholarships and requirements for foreign education, organized by the Faculty of Technology, University of Sri Jagadhanpura, in collaboration with Career Skills Development Society, University of Sri Jagadhanpura. We are truly delighted to have such an enthusiastic audience gathered here to explore new possibilities for studying abroad and achieving success academic goals. Today's session will be conducted by Ms. Isa Spori, the Education USA Advisor and Country Program Coordinator at the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission. Isa Spori is the Education USA Advisor and Program Coordinator at the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission of Sri Lankan Heritage. Isa moved from her hometown of Chicago, USA to Colombo, Sri Lanka 2023. She has experience in private college consulting and work at her alma mater, New York University, as a graduate assistant in the Center of Student Life and as an assistant to a professor. Before joining Fulbright, Isa was the public engagement coordinator at the Jeffrey Bauer Trust and has also worked in legal office. Isa's session is about educational exchange and working closely with Sri Lankan students in
Miss Nisanshala, your microphone got muted a little.
uh, now it's okay.
Yes, you are audible.
Let me begin. Okay, sorry about that. Um, Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today for this exciting online awareness session on scholarships and requirements for foreign education, organized by the Faculty of Technology, University of Sri Jagadhanpura, in collaboration with Career Skills Development Society, University of Sri Jagadhanpura. We are truly delighted to have such an enthusiastic audience gathered here to explore new possibilities for studying abroad and achieving success academic goals. Today's session will be conducted by Ms. Isa Spori, the Education USA Advisor and Country Program Coordinator at the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission. Isa Spori is the Education USA Advisor and Program Coordinator at the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission of Sri Lankan Heritage. Isa moved from her hometown Chicago, USA to Colombo, Sri Lanka 2023. She has experience in private college consulting and work at her alma mater, New York University, as a graduate assistant in the Center of Student Life and as an assistant to a professor. Before joining Fulbright, Isa was the public engagement coordinator at the Jeffrey Bauer Trust and has also worked in legal offices. Isa is passionate about education exchange and working closely with Sri Lankan students in their pursuit for higher education. The purpose of today's session is to understand scholarship opportunities available for higher education abroad, learn about academic and admission requirements, gain practical tips for successful application and preparation. So, get ready to dream big, learn right, and take flight. Without further delay, let's warmly welcome our speaker, Ms. Isa Spori, to begin today's session.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I hope you can all hear me, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for having me to speak at this session. Like my bio said, I am the Education USA Advisor at the United States Sri Lanka Fulbright Commission, meaning that my entire job is working with Sri Lankan students like yourselves who are aspiring to pursue higher education in the United States from the bachelor's level all the way through master's and PhD. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can start the presentation. And I hope you can all see my screen. So before I begin, just a little bit about what Fulbright is and Education USA. Fulbright is a global program that was started after World War II in an effort for the US to advance its foreign diplomacy and build bridges of mutual understanding and peace through academic exchange. Fulbright has basically two tenets. One is that it sends Americans all around the world to different countries to conduct research and in some cases teach English. And two, it sends people from those countries to the United States for educational opportunities, including master's degrees, fellowships, and other programs. Education USA is a part of the Fulbright Commission here in Sri Lanka. Education USA is the official source on US higher education. We have offices and teams all around the world who do exactly what I do, which is work again with students in those countries to complete the application process for US institutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that application process looks like in this presentation. I am of Sri Lankan background myself. I moved here 2 years ago and I started working at Fulbright about 6 months ago. So it's been a really wonderful adventure to do my higher education and schooling in the United States, then move back here to Sri Lanka to pursue my career. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is why study abroad in the first place, and particularly in the United States. I think there are a lot of things that make a US education extremely valuable, but these are the four that we've identified as ways that really set the United States apart from a lot of its peers. The first one is the amount of choice. In the US, there are 4,300 plus higher education institutions that are accredited, meaning that your degree would be valid and accepted anywhere in the world. When you think about that number, 4,000 plus, and you consider that each university will have anywhere from maybe 20 even to 7,500 programs, you are left with a massive number and an incredible amount of choice. This idea of choice replicates itself throughout your education, from being able to choose the institution that you wish to study at, to the program or major itself, all the way to your classes, your electives, and other parts of your education, such as internships or clubs and societies. That factors into the second point, which is flexibility. Studying in the US is very flexible and self-directed. Universities expect that students will come with some level of direction or idea or thought of what they wish to do and how they wish to do it, which means that you as a student have a lot of opportunity to design your own educational program in a way that suits you. Just one example of that, when I was studying at New York University, which is in New York City, I was studying sociology, but I also had an interest in music and the arts. So in my final year of university, I took a piano class because I had enough credits to pursue that in addition to completing my academic coursework. Another example is a friend of mine who went to law school to become an attorney, and she had an interest in writing, so she took a creative writing course. So you have this flexibility no matter if you are an undergraduate student, like many of you, or even if you are at the master's or PhD level or another terminal degree, such as my friend's degree in law, which in the US is done after you finish your undergrad or your bachelor's. That takes us to the third point, which is specialization. You can get very specific about what you wish to study in the US. If you have a particular research interest, a topic that you're passionate about, which I imagine that many of you in the Faculty of Technology do, you can pursue that topic all the way to a very granular level. And that works in tandem with this last point, which is that the research and the faculty at US institutions is second to none. These universities are usually extremely well equipped with technology and labs and other resources, as well as funding, which we'll talk about a lot in this presentation, to support you on your academic journey if you wish to conduct research, if you hope to get a grant to conduct some sort of study or write a paper. That is again available and encouraged for all students all the way from the undergraduate level. And then, of course, it is expected at the graduate level, which is what many of you might be looking at. Just very briefly to discuss the types of degrees that are available at US institutions. Of course, we offer 4-year bachelor's degrees. These are usually a prerequisite to getting a master's or a PhD. So you will want to make sure that you have 4 years of education or an equivalent under your belt. And that's something that we can talk about together on a case-by-case basis to ensure that you meet the requirements for applying to graduate programs. There's also something called an associate's degree, which is typically for people who are looking to start their higher education maybe later in life or are looking to save a little bit of money at the beginning of their academic career before transferring into a 4-year institution. And then there are the postgraduate options, which include master's degrees, typically around 1 to 2 years, doctoral degrees or a PhD. Those go around 3 to 5 years, sometimes more, depending on your research. And other what we call terminal degrees in the US. So those would be if you were to become a doctor and receive an MD, a medical doctor, or an attorney, you would receive a JD, and so on. Before we get into the idea of scholarships and funding and how to finance your education, I did want to talk about these 5 steps that we use at Education USA in order to apply successfully to universities. The first one is to do your research. Surely for all of you at the Faculty of Technology, this is something that you're already very used to doing. But when I said earlier that US institutions really value autonomy and self-directed learning, that begins in the application process itself before you're even enrolled at a school. Thinking back again to the number I gave at the beginning of this presentation, 4,300 plus, you are looking at a massive range of choice in your institution, and it is up to you as the student to determine the types of schools that are best for you. There are a lot of different ways to do this. First, of course, you would consider if the university has the academic program that you are interested in. But beyond that, since many of them likely will, you have to consider the specifics of the program itself. For example, do the faculty members at this institution study the same things that you want to study? Is there a lab or a research incubator or another initiative at this university that makes it different to one of its peers? Maybe there's a strong focus on research that you appreciate. Maybe there's a class or two that's offered at one institution and not another. These are all factors that should be considered in your research, along with certain practical lifestyle elements, for example, location. If you think about the length of a degree, again, anywhere from 2 to 5+ years, you want to make sure that you're going to be somewhere where you feel comfortable and supported. For some of you, that might look like a big city with lots of things to do, internship opportunities, research opportunities. For others, you may consider a smaller town, a quieter environment to be more your speed. And of course, you would want to consider other things like the weather, diversity, the food. There's honestly so many different things to consider when you're looking at making a move across the globe. You can take that from me, having done it myself. I'm from Chicago, which is basically freezing 9 months out of the year, and I'm a lot happier in the sunshine and in Sri Lankan weather. And that did make a difference in terms of my happiness and the way that I conduct myself professionally and personally. So I would not rule out some of those types of considerations when you are researching your degree. Step 2 is what we will spend the most time on today, which is consider your finances and your funding. There are a handful of different ways that you can finance your education in the United States, and we will go over a handful of them today. But this conversation is really important to have early and upfront, which is why we list it as step 2. Some universities offer really generous funding for international students, and others it's a little bit tougher to secure that funding and finances because of the way that the university allocates its finances and its money. So again, figuring this out early and upfront can really help you with the rest of the application process and set you up for success as you move forward. Number 3 is complete your application. Now, this sounds a little bit mundane, but there are so many different elements, and I'll just very briefly touch on 3. Of course, you will submit your grades and your exam scores from your undergraduate, but you also will be submitting something called a GRE, that's the Graduate Record Examination. It's a standardized test that is meant to test your aptitude. We have a research library and some computers at our office, which is located in Colombo, so not too far from your university, to help you with preparation for this test, and all of those materials are free to access. You will also have to perform an English proficiency exam, most likely the TOEFL or the IELTS, although some universities have now started accepting the Duolingo English test, if any of you know that little green icon on your phone with the owl. So those are just a few elements of the application, but a couple of others that sometimes are overlooked and again make the US a little bit different than some of its other peers. The first one is an essay. This essay is typically called the Statement of Purpose. What this essay does is it shows graduate schools 2 things. Number 1, what you want to study and why, and how that will contribute to your academic career and your professional goals. But 2, it should give them a small glimpse into who you are. What's your background? What is your story? How did your life up until this moment influence your decision to pursue this type of graduate study? So you're creating a narrative and a story while still making sure to emphasize that you have done your homework from step 1 and you have very clear proof as to why you are a good fit for the school and why the school is a good fit for you. Part of Education USA Advising Services is that we can help you with these types of preparation materials, all free of charge. The second element of the application that's really critical is a letter of recommendation. Oftentimes you will need more than one, maybe 2, and these will come typically from professors in your undergraduate degree, as well as any supervisors that you have at work or your jobs. So hopefully, as I'm speaking to all of you, you have a professor or a lecturer in mind from your undergraduate who you know you can approach and ask for this letter. If you don't, it would be time to start staying after class, maybe visiting their office, asking about their research, and getting to know them a bit better so that you can ask for this letter because it is a really crucial part of your application. The third and final element that I want to discuss is the CV or resume. Universities like to see students who are well-rounded and have multiple interests beyond the classroom. So all of you, I imagine, are extremely gifted technology students. You're probably getting excellent grades and your exams are high scores, and that's all fabulous. But what about outside of school? What else do you do? Are you involved in your community doing community service or volunteer? Do you have your own foundation? Are you an athlete? Do you play sports? Maybe you are a member of a student society or an organization on campus. Maybe you started one yourself. Perhaps you help your family at home with responsibilities in the household, or you have a job either on campus or off campus. All of that counts for US universities, and nothing is weighted higher than the other. So if you spend Saturdays, maybe you work at a supermarket, that's excellent. And that's experience that universities do want to see. It matters to them that you are involved and that you have interests beyond just your classroom. So that's again something that you can start doing to prepare now. The fourth step, of course, is applying for your visa through the US Embassy. And number 5 is attend our pre-departure orientation, which is a one-day event that we host each year in July to both celebrate and send off all of the Sri Lankans who will be traveling to the US to begin their degree in the fall. So types of financial aid. This is, of course, the main portion of this presentation. There are 3 types of financial aid that I'd like to cover today, and oftentimes universities will offer all 3, although occasionally it may just be 1 or 2. So once again, thinking back to that first step of doing your research, all of this information is available on university websites, and at Education USA, we're happy to work with you and guide you towards those resources. So 3 types of financial aid. The first one is need-based financial aid. This is an evaluation of your financial situation, either as an individual or as a family. US universities will ask that you send financial documentation such as bank statements and income and pay stubs to the university for them to evaluate how much money and income is circulating within your family and whether or not you meet the thresholds for them to award aid. This can be done by different types of forms. Certain universities will use a federal form, others will ask you to submit that information privately. Not all universities offer need-based financial aid to international students. This is a really critical point. Oftentimes in the US, there is an expectation that international students might fund
Recording in progress.
education themselves. So it is important to note that certain schools will not accept any documentation to award need-based financial aid if you are applying internationally as a Sri Lankan citizen. The second type of aid is merit-based financial aid. This is when a university looks at your record as a student, holds it against their application and admission standards, and decides whether or not to award aid based on your performance as a student. So again, if you think back to that earlier slide about the different elements of your application, That is where things like the essay, your activities on your resume or your CV, your work experience, your letters of recommendation, that is where these start to factor in. Like I said, I imagine that all of you get great grades in school and that you're excellent students at your university. You are competing against excellent students from literally every university in the world. And so many of those students are also top of their class and really, really high achieving. So a university in the US will be looking for candidates who add something more, who are not just about the grades and the exam scores, but are typically someone who's well-rounded and who they can see being a really positive impression on campus. That is essentially merit-based financial aid. It's an assessment of, yes, your academic qualifications, but also the rest of your application portfolio. The US follows something called holistic review in their admissions, which means that they're trying to get a sense of who you are as a person. And like I said, that factors into admission to the university itself, all the way into whether or not they choose to award you a financial aid package. These can vary in terms of the amount. One of my friends actually just began a master's program in the United States at a school called Brandeis, and she's from Sri Lanka, just from Colombo, and she was awarded 75% of her tuition each year is covered entirely by the university, and that was obtained on a merit-based academic scholarship. These are typically awarded by department. So, for example, she's studying political science. So their aid structure might look different to a technology department's aid structure. Again, it's really, really important to visit each university's individual website where they will lay out all of the requirements and qualifications for how they review merit-based aid. Another key element of this type of aid is that sometimes it will require an extra application and sometimes it will not. Most often, universities will evaluate you for aid automatically. They will look at your application and hold it against all the other students who have applied and decide whether or not you will receive money. Other schools do ask to see an additional application. That might look like another scholarship essay, or maybe submitting a sort of cover letter. It just depends on the school and what they require. And once again, this is exactly what we offer at Education USA and at the Fulbright Commission to help you achieve those scholarship goals. So we provide free advising where we can sit with you, work on your essay together, edit other materials of your application, and help you put your best foot forward as you're applying for both admission, but also for scholarships. The final part of financial aid that I want to talk about is something called an assistantship. And this is usually the most thorough and comprehensive form of financial aid, especially for international students. An assistantship is essentially a job on campus, typically through your department. Very frequently, these will pay your tuition plus a stipend in exchange for the work that you contribute as a student. You'll see on the screen there are 3 different types: research, graduate, and teaching assistantships. And I'll go through each of those individually. The first one is a research assistantship. This is when you work typically one-on-one with a professor or maybe part of a small team and do exactly as it says, which is conduct research for a project that a professor or researcher might be conducting at your university. In order to complete these projects, professors will apply for grants for external funding to complete their work. And oftentimes in that grant, they will write into the budget a line for a graduate assistant. This budget line will pay for your tuition and often will extend into a stipend that you can use on housing, meals, and other living expenses. My supervisor and boss at the Fulbright Commission received his PhD and went on to be a professor who helped dozens of other students obtain their PhDs through research assistantships. And he always makes the joke that you can't live like a king or a queen, but it's certainly enough to live like a graduate student, which is fairly humbly, but with everything that you need for your academic success. So that is a research assistantship. The way these are typically obtained, again, thinking back to the idea of autonomy and self-directed learning, is the student reaches out to the professor to inquire if they are in need of students to work as research assistants, and if they're able to do so, should they apply to the PhD program at that university. So even before you look into applying, you do need to check using university websites and faculty research to determine whether or not there is a professor at your desired institution or institutions who's offering the type of research that you may want to conduct and work on as a student. The second line is a graduate assistantship. These can vary depending on the university. I worked as a graduate assistant when I was obtaining my master's degree, which I also got at New York University. I worked at NYU's Center for Student Life as a graduate assistant in their Club Life division. So I was working in the office that helped mostly undergraduate students acclimate to the university and get involved on campus. I oversaw over a dozen or so clubs that were started by undergraduate students and sometimes had graduate student participation. And I worked with them on setting their budget for the year, executing different events, mediating conflict, and electing the board for the following year. So graduate assistantships can maybe look a little more like what you would think of as a traditional office job. But similarly, they can pay a stipend or a portion of your tuition as well as cover some of your living expenses. These can be applied for usually through university career websites, though again, you will have to do some digging on your own and inquire at the university what types of options might be available to you. In other cases, they may be a portion of your degree itself. So if you are completing a degree in a certain subject and there's a corresponding office on campus, then those positions might be reserved for students directly from your department. The final type of assistantship that I'd like to discuss is a teaching assistantship. This is also pretty straightforward and exactly what it sounds like. You, as a qualified academic, will be teaching usually a group of undergraduate students. Just like everything, this can look different university to university. Most frequently, the structure that you follow is the professor that you work under as a PhD student will have a lecture of hundreds of students. Could be 70, could be 600, 700, 800. And that group of students gets split up into smaller groups throughout the week called recitation sections. So you'll have your big lecture that will be delivered by the professor, and then you'll break into these discussion groups called recitations. Oftentimes, teaching assistants are recruited to run those lecture sections, those discussion sections. So you will be working with a small group of undergraduate students to synthesize and analyze the material that was relayed in the lecture. You'll design lesson plans, facilitate class discussions, assign homework, and grade exams and papers. So it's a really, really critical job, and it can be extremely rewarding as well. This is another way that many PhD students finance their education. In some cases, you may even be asked to design a course, co-teach with the professor, or deliver a few lectures yourself. So these are the three main types of financial aid, especially at the graduate level, paying very close attention to the second one, merit-based financial aid, which is awarded typically through departments, and assistantships, which is also done just generally through your academic department itself. And I'll take questions at the end, so hope you're writing those down and saving them. I also want to talk about some scholarship opportunities that you can look for beyond those three types of financial aid. The first one is the Fulbright Master's Scholarship. A little bit more background on Fulbright. The Sri Lankan wing of the Fulbright Commission was established in 1952, which makes it the oldest one in South Asia. Fulbright has been awarding scholarships to students wishing to pursue a master's degree for about 75 years. And every year we take about 5 or 6 students who are fully funded, all expenses paid, to complete the master's degree of their choosing. Just to give you an idea of the competition, it is pretty strong. We tend to get around 200 applicants. This year, I believe the official number was 189. From that, 16 finalists are chosen, and again, 5 or 6 are selected to receive the scholarship. But for those 6 students, the experience is transformative. It's life-changing. Tuition, airfare, lodging, meals, and other living expenses, as well as a small stipend, are all completely covered, leaving you with nothing to worry about except your grades and your degree. The application process has 2 rounds. The first is a paper application. You can complete it online, but it's a written application, and that is due every year on May 31st. So this year it's in about 6 months. If you are selected as a finalist, you will go through a round of interviews. These interviews are conducted first by a team, typically of Fulbright alumni, as well as other professionals in Sri Lanka. And if you make it to the final round, you are interviewed by a member of the Fulbright board. Fulbright is chaired by a board of 3 Sri Lankans and 3 Americans who together make up the Binational Commission in Sri Lanka. The 3 Americans are members of the US Embassy, and the 3 Sri Lankans are appointed by the Sri Lankan president. So this is a very competitive scholarship because of the opportunity that it offers, but I highly encourage all of you who are considering pursuing a master's degree in the US to think about applying. In the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the requirements and the preferences for this scholarship. Now, there are other ways to obtain scholarships outside of Fulbright. An important note about the Fulbright scholarship is that you have to work collaboratively if you are selected with the Fulbright team to identify a university that will work for you, your studies, and your finances. So this is not a scholarship for students who have their hearts set on one university and that's the only one that they would consider, because typically that won't be the one that can offer the best financial package. So it's really critical for this scholarship that you keep an open mind and that you have a couple of different options of where you might like to go or be. And those are typically the students who have the most success. Some of the other elements of the master's applications that I mentioned earlier, such as the GRE and the TOEFL, are also covered by this scholarship. So you will be given vouchers to complete all of those different tests and exams that you need for your application. Now also looking at the bottom 2, we have university scholarships and department scholarships. I've included a URL on this slide, educationusa.state.gov/find financial aid. Education USA has a webpage that lists hundreds of available scholarships administered by universities and departments. Sometimes universities, as we talked about in the merit-based financial aid conversation, will award these scholarships school-wide. Other times it's within departments, but you can find a lot of information on these different scholarships by using that URL in red. There are also, of course, external scholarships. Different foundations have different opportunities for students, so you may want to research some of those as well. We're happy to assist with this process, and we also really like when students come to us having done a little bit of research, a Google research or two, and have some ideas in mind of the different scholarships they can apply for, and we can work with you to refine and strengthen those applications as needed. So I want to talk a little bit about the requirements for the Fulbright Master's Scholarship. As you can see, there are a handful. The first two are really, really critical, and that is reside in Sri Lanka a minimum 2 years before applying and do the same after. At Fulbright, we always like to say that this degree is not a one-way ticket. If you think about the founding of Fulbright and the idea of mutual understanding and exchange, the purpose of a Fulbright scholarship is to obtain an education at one of the most dignified and reputed institutions in the world and to come back to the country that you're from and apply those learnings here to build up Sri Lanka and contribute positively to its future. So if you are looking to resettle in another country, then perhaps the Fulbright scholarship is not the best option for you. But for those of you who are passionate about investing your energy, your resources, and your education back into Sri Lanka and to help future generations grow and thrive, then this is a perfect opportunity to do so. Like I had mentioned earlier, most US institutions require a 4-year bachelor's degree as a prerequisite for their graduate programs, so you will need one to apply to the Fulbright Master's Scholarship as well. However, there are ways that we can help you obtain this if you don't have a 4-year degree. I know some institutions in Sri Lanka, an undergraduate degree is 3 years. So we can work with you and talk with you about ways to fill out that one extra year that you might be missing in order to qualify for the program. Anyways, as you'll see in the next point, you do need at least 1 year of full-time professional experience, meaning that we like to see students who have worked a little bit outside of their undergraduate and not gone straight into a master's degree after completing their bachelor's. You may not hold another degree from a different US university. And if you are applying for or already holding green card or US citizenship, then unfortunately this disqualifies you as well. The scholarship is uniquely designed for Sri Lankans who have not had much exposure or experience in the US, and again, who intend on returning to Sri Lanka to work on issues here and give back to the country. These are what we call our preferences for the Fulbright Master's Scholarship. So the previous slide was requirements. Those are non-negotiables that you must possess. But we also like to see these 4 bullet points, which will strengthen your application or perhaps give you an advantage. The first one is having no prior travel to the US. Again, thinking about those earlier points regarding green card or citizenship. This scholarship really primarily benefits Sri Lankans who have had limited exposure to the United States and its educational institutions. We say that it was required to reside in Sri Lanka 2 years after the degree, but ideally we like to see a number closer to 5 years in order for the country to really feel the impact and the benefit of the degree that you obtained in the US. And that typically goes very, very well for Sri Lankan recipients of the Fulbright Master's Scholarship. I'll just give you a few examples. Number one is in the 1980s, a young woman from Sri Lanka went to the University of Illinois, which is in the middle of the cornfields in the state that I'm from, to receive her master's degree in, I believe, finance. She completed that degree, had a wonderful experience, did some extracurriculars, and made lifelong friends, moved back to Sri Lanka, and her career took off. She's now the incoming CEO of the Colombo Stock Exchange. Another young man went for a Fulbright visiting scholarship, came back after working at commercial bank for a handful of years, and retired as the CEO of commercial bank. He is now a chairman of the board of directors of Carson Cumberbatch, which manufactures Lion beer products, among others, and he's a member of our Fulbright board. These are just a few examples of Sri Lankans who have taken their Fulbright scholarship experience and translated it into thriving careers in Sri Lanka. And that is what we really, really love to see at Fulbright. Of course, we hope that you're someone who will demonstrate strong academic and leadership potential. You will be acting as a representative for Sri Lanka, for the university that you graduated from, and for Fulbright. So it is really critical that your conduct matches those expectations. And as the last slide says, be a good representative of Sri Lanka. Fulbright was founded on mutual exchange, and you will be perhaps the first Sri Lankan that a lot of American people have met. So we do expect that you represent the country positively. I mentioned this a few times before in the earlier slides, but I just want to emphasize again what Education USA can offer for you at this stage in your academic careers. We conduct different types of outreach sessions. I just returned from an 8-day trip to the eastern and northern provinces to meet with students in those areas. We have our reference library, which I mentioned earlier, that contains test preparation books, books on how to choose the right university, and more. And we also are installing some new computers to help you with that research and application process. We can authenticate educational documents that you obtain in the United States if you need those qualifications to work here in Sri Lanka. We also offer individual advising services, which is my favorite part of my job. We can have a one-on-one meeting to discuss any concerns or questions you might have on the application process. Sometimes I meet with students once or twice and their concerns are alleviated. Other times I meet with students regularly once, twice a week for months until they complete their entire set of university applications. That process can take anywhere from a few months to an entire year. So I get to know students really closely and we work together on consolidating all of their documents and materials over the course of that year. I'm available to meet in person at our Colombo office or virtually. I'll put my email in the chat at the end of this presentation in case you'd like to contact me. We also have the pre-departure orientation each year that I mentioned, and we are working to provide scholarship alerts on our social media. So be sure to follow Education USA Sri Lanka and Fulbright Sri Lanka on Facebook to learn more. I'm happy to open it up to questions at this point, and I've just included again our 2 different emails. If you have questions about the Fulbright Master's Scholarship, you can email inquiries@fulbrightsrilanka.org. And if you have any questions related to studying in the United States, obtaining scholarships, or are looking to get individual advising, you can feel free to email us at colombo@educationusa.org. And I'll just point out our website URL at the bottom of this slide, fulbrightsrilanka.org. This contains all of the information that I presented today and more. And I really hope that I hear from you or see some of you soon, either in advising or perhaps through the master's scholarship. And before I open to questions, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And I wish you all the best in your undergraduate studies and hope that some of you will consider looking at the US for your next step in your education. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Isa, for that truly insightful and inspiring session. And if anyone has any question, feel free to unmute yourself and also you can put your message in the chat box. And also before you leave, please make sure to fill the feedback form that we put in the chat box. And now, if anyone has a problem, you can ask now or you can put in the chat.
I see one question. Do we need any class for scholarships? No.